All right, shall we start with this virtual roundtable? Welcome, and well, good to see that so many of you are still sticking around. It's obviously been very inspiring 2 days, and well, you may have a lot of questions still. So in this roundtable, we try to make a link between the 2 days. Yesterday was about light, understanding some of the physics of light, and then artists working with light as a medium. Today was more looking at the museum side of things, how you use light to show art rather than just make art. Although in some situations, you might actually be reshaping and recreating art with the light that we use in museums. So that may be an interesting theme to touch upon. If we link these two, we touched upon a question that was already partly in the discussion as well, and that's understanding the artwork, an artwork using light as a medium or incorporating light in the artwork installation. And then I have to think of Adrian's paintings. If I were just to come across a painting and I hang it on my wall, it would be nothing but some paint on a canvas, and it doesn't have the character. And I think one of the things we need to understand when displaying objects is catching the character determining features. And that is also what we need to preserve. And we saw that in Olivier's presentations and examples, case studies as well. You're looking for this character determining feature of light. And then, of course, the question comes, how do you document that? It starts with documenting, and then we have to think of strategies to preserve that. As Stefan also pointed out in the discussion, that is not unlike other installation art, where we have to understand the artist's intent. We think we know that from traditional art, but do we really? George has already sort of triggered us yesterday. There's more to it than the eye sees. So let's start with the modern art, and a question also for Anne and other artists, Adrian. What is it that, how does light determine the character of your objects, and how should we document that? How can we? What are the features of light that we need to document?
So maybe Anne can answer that first.
Anne, are you there? We knocked her off her chair. Marcus, I can see that you're there. Did you get the question?
No, I just arrived now, sorry.
Good on you, just in time. Then maybe Adrian should start. The question was, what are the character determining features of light in objects that you as an artist create, and how can we document them so that we can display them in the right manner and recreate them in the right manner and preserve them in the right manner?
Yeah, so I can answer this question for myself. So in my case, I create very specific combinations of wavelengths and pigments. Of course, these combinations are only possible within technologies that are available. Sometimes also I may combine some technologies or create some specific situations. For example, I would take an LED, then I would place a phosphor on it to change its spectrum, and then filter the results. So in order to get to a very specific wavelength, and this will be in relationship with a combination of, for example, two specific pigments that will react in a specific manner to this combination of wavelengths. So in my case, I document everything, and I keep doubles of all my systems. And if someone is like buying this, or if it goes into a collection, it will come with a small book containing all the documentation on how to deal with failure of the system, how to calibrate it, what kind of computer programs and what kind of code is controlling the system, and how you can, how can maybe someone like Olivier, well, I try to provide a document that allows someone like Olivier or someone else to study how it works and to reproduce it. And so what's important, I guess, principles are well defined and that the material is available. And also, if we imagine a future where maybe another technology could be available, then how to adapt this concept, in how to translate it faithfully in a new system.
All right. And Marcus, do you recognize that?
I have to admit that we are not thinking so far with our work because we are not so much museums working. So, I mean, we should think probably better of this question, but normally we just do the work and then we go on for the next one.
Mm-hmm. But there you're touching onto something that you don't know what collectors are going to get from you and where your objects may end up, maybe in a museum of education, for example. And then all of a sudden they have a problem because they don't know what matters to you.
That's true. Absolutely. Yeah.
Olivier, do you do artist interviews to extract the information you need for preservation?
Well, when they answer, because sometimes I don't have time, I send an email and I can join. Either the artist doesn't answer or his answer come too late.
Oh.
Yeah, it happens. So sometimes it arrives after the restoration, but usually it's not quite a problem because, yeah, if there is a problem in your in the artist response, I mean, if I done the restoration and I saw I did something wrong, it won't matter anyway, because what I usually do is something reversible, so and documented, so I can always come back, or
you can restore the
I've done
restoration.
my job good. Yes.
Mm-hmm. Also, the principle of reversibility works here as well. Yeah.
You have to, absolutely.
Yep, yep. Anne, have you already connected to us?
No.
Je suis là, mais j'ai un nouveau... Je ne sais pas si on m'entend. Tu m'entends, Adrien? Ok. Est-ce que tu vas pouvoir m'aider à traduire en français ce qu'elle a demandé, s'il te plaît?
Okay, so Anne is asking the question to be translated. Mm-hmm. So, can you repeat the question, please?
En français? Ooh, no. No, the question is, in your case with the blue eyes, what are the character determining features of what light do you need? What information does a museum and a restorer need to have to be able to understand your work properly as far as light is concerned?
Okay. Donc la question pour toi, Anne, dans ton cas, avec ton travail sur le bleu, quelles seraient finalement les informations qu'un collectionneur ou un musée devrait avoir pour être certain que la lumière qui est utilisée pour finalement pour apporter de la lumière à ton travail est utilisée de manière correcte, ou bien est-ce que c'est quelque chose qui est important pour ton travail?
Alors, on parle au niveau de l'éclairage.
Oui.
Oui. Alors, effectivement, c'est une question, pour le moment, je ne l'ai pas traitée. J'avoue que c'est un champ que je connais très peu, que j'ai très peu étudié, mais la question va se poser, forcément. Dans le cas de l'œuvre qui est exposée dans le musée, j'ai surtout donné des indications en demandant à ce que il n'y ait pas d'éclairage jaune, forcément, puisque sinon le bleu disparaît. Mais j'ai pas approfondi la question. Et c'est une question très importante, mais j'ai pas eu le temps d'y travailler.
Okay. So I can translate this if you want. Anne said that she didn't explore much the question of lighting, but it's an important question. And for example, when she worked with this museum in Napoli, she explicitly asked that the light in the exhibition space shouldn't be too yellow, otherwise the blueness of the work doesn't appear much. So she did give instructions, and she thinks that she could actually explore that question further in the future.
Yeah, very good. Because that also brings me to Georges yesterday. I really enjoyed your presentation, and it made me think, and exactly that thing of we think we know what paintings are meant to look like, and then you showed the Seurat, which actually requires its own lighting to understand what the painter meant. So for the light designers, I think both Wilfried and Chris, how do you find the right light for the artist's intent? Is there such a thing?
Sorry, I didn't get your question.
Well, I'd first ask it to Chris and Wilfried, how they would choose the right light for what they think the painting needs.
Yeah, well, mostly they talk to us in emotions. We translate it very technical. That's what we do. And there's so many, it's so diverse what artists ask to us. Sometimes they ask light that we find, this is like very, it's not light, but when we find it for them, it's sometimes the combination of the artwork and this wrong light is a perfect combination. It's possible. But yeah, it's strange with artists. We have funny talks about this, but mainly it's I find my job is translating their emotions and we do the technical thing. It's this kind of thing we do.
Yeah, maybe I can add here something. I'm more the scientist, the researcher, and from a point of physicist. So I'm not the designer in our team at Bartenbach. Yeah. So the translator, like Pipe said, in our company is a project manager or a lighting designer, and I serve them with some basics, from visual perception, etc. But more some general basics on this. And the other things are, I don't know. I cannot catch these things with science or with physics. This is, as you said, emotion or feelings, etc. So this is art. Yeah. Some things are looking very, how to say, they express something. They look nice. They look sporty. I don't know. I'm far away from explaining these emotions and appearances with scientific based things. Yeah, with physics and so. So I only can give, or in the Bartenbach team, the research only can give some basic rules. Yeah, how the luminances should be, and the contrast, etc., and such things. So, but we are not really the specialists in the team for this designing. You understand what I try to express? Yeah. Okay. So I'm very sorry.
It's okay,
I know my limits. So okay.
Yeah, but it also shows the cooperation that's needed. You provide a scientific basis. We need Chris to translate that into a light design. But then we come back to
Chris in our
Georges.
team. Yeah. Okay.
Then we come back to Georges, because Chris, with a modern artist, you can ask them what is the right light. But Seurat, what do you know about Seurat, and what is the right light for Seurat? Now that we have heard Georges.
No, I
try to say that this is a mystery we don't know. I think that Seurat painted his parade with gaslight because of the experiment made in the Metropolitan. When they saw the painting through a light very similar to the gaslight, so it looked very different. So the conclusion was that probably Seurat used a gaslight in order to paint it. But the problem is that when this work was first exhibited, it was the because the place where it was presented, this place closed at 5 o'clock. So Seurat perfectly knew before showing his piece that it could be only seen through daylight. So I don't know exactly more about it. And what I also said yesterday in the discussion of my paper is that we have different points of view, in particular from Pissarro. Pissarro showed paintings in an art gallery, a very famous one at the time, that of Durand Ruel. And so Durand Ruel used, it was very a new fashion at the time in Paris, used in the night gaslight. And so Pissarro said that his own paintings looked very different. And he said that the orange disappeared completely through the gaslight. But it's just all the way around from what happened with Seurat. So I don't know more about this issue. I just wonder whether there were not different kind of gaslight at the time. And so this would explain the difference, but I don't know anything more about this complex issue, at least at the moment.
Yeah. No, but it touches on discussions that we also have here in the Netherlands. We have this artist and light person, Peter Struijke. You may have heard of the name. And whenever we talk to him, he claims that daylight is the only good light in a museum. Because Van Gogh was painting outside, so his paintings should be seen in daylight, which means we have to recreate daylight. And that's what we try to do with the perfect color rendering. But Stéphane, is there a perfect color rendering for objects that were not painted by daylight? You see the lips move.
So if Stéphane doesn't show up, I just so waiting for Stéphane. I put a link in the chat, and this is a video about this work by Seurat. It's a video that has been published by the Metropolitan, precisely about this experience where they imitate. Well, I think almost 20 years after the experience that Georges mentioned, the curators of the Metropolitan, during an exhibition about Seurat, tried to recreate an artificial gaslight And in the video, we can see quite well what happens to the painting when it's illuminated like this. I think Stefan is there now.
I think so. My microphone setting shows the signal. Am I there?
Yeah, we hear you.
Okay. This is a bit, this problem's been around for a while. What was the intention for painters, especially since we know that despite the mythology of the North Light in an artist's gallery, that in Northern Europe, when you're finishing a painting in the winter, the likelihood of having daylight is low. And then there's the whole issue in historic house museums. What's the correct way to present? What occurs to me is that rather than try and settle a single answer, is that, as has been suggested by a couple of speakers, the option for dynamic lighting would mean that you could show the Seurat with one type of light, which is our best guess at gaslight with a mantle, presumably, the sort of the latest version of gaslight, relatively high, not far from 2800 K. And then with a daylight or a north sky, there would be problems with adaptation of the eye, so you wouldn't want it flicking back and forth every 2 seconds. But you could certainly even say Mondays, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays, the Seurat is under gaslight lighting, and the rest of the week it's something else. So I think because we have the option to simulate now with LEDs without actually physically bringing a gaslight into the gallery and setting it on fire, we've got the option to not force ourselves into a decision, but to give a dynamic option to the lighting.
What do you think, Chris? Would you do that?
Yes. yeah. It's yeah, we can build this. No, it's so much possible now. It's well, if you see what Adrian made, it's you can imagine whatever you want. It can be built, but if it is, I wouldn't. I think it would be very strange to try to imitate so much the old times, because we're not looking in this way. We look in a very different way than people looked in that time. So it would only be very strange, I guess.
Can I just jump in there, because I think it won't be long before the incandescent lamp, tungsten lamps, will be seen as a historic form of lighting. And if you push your argument, Chris, then it goes to once we get used to 5000 K everywhere with LED lights, that even at low light levels, people would say, shall we simulate 20th century incandescent lighting on this artwork, or should we just stick with what we can do with emulating daylight? Because there's whatever the discussion of colorimetry comes up, there's no avoiding the fact that saying that an incandescent lamp at 2800 K is a standard, is a calibration. That is a historic anomaly, which I think will soon be seen as an anachronism. There's only one certain standard for evolution of our eye, and that's daylight. So everything else, including incandescent, is going to be seen as just part of a historical process.
Mm-hmm. And then we turn our museum into a big installation and an experience, a performance with all the artworks.
Yeah, people in an extreme case can make an argument that maybe evolution, or at least sort of cultural evolution, happened fast enough for firelight. So fires to become influential in our perception, or sunrise and sunset. Did we worry about being eaten by tigers in the end of the day more than we did at the beginning of the day? I mean, those are possible refinements on some of the standards that our eye evolved to deal with, but it's going to bring us back to daylight in its various forms. There was an extreme case of correcting lighting, of course, with the Rothko paintings in New York, which the ones with the big red squares, which had been in a student union, I think, at Yale or Harvard, and were completely faded because he used Lithopone reds from Woolworths or something in the 1950s before he had money. Those have lost most of their red, but they did extensive research from slides to correct the colors in the old slides to find out, and they essentially projected an image of the correct color onto the Rothko, and you now are illuminating the Rothko to fully recover the colors. I think that kind of thing is as well, and similar to what we showed 30 years ago, that if you show a high blue band onto paintings with a yellow varnish, you can very much remove the perception of the yellow varnish, as long as you use a square of light that's just on the painting itself. These are all extensions of the same argument as to whether we use lighting to make differences for the viewer. And it seems to me that all of these things come back to, we don't have to think of it as setting the lighting for the next 10 years of permanent display. We can have different days of the week, different hours, morning and afternoon lighting. This is all feasible now. It's not going to add much to the cost in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Restoration with light is definitely an issue.
Varnish removal with light, much safer.
Yeah,
much safer.
Although then you're hitting it with blue light, which is the more powerful. And I've also seen that since red is the fading color, which absorbs the blue. If we take the blue out, does that save our reds? What do you think?
Well, I showed that with the Carmen it does, and that's the one we have data for in terms of its damage spectra. But I don't want to leave lighting and conservator profession with the idea that what we tried for many years with Harrison's damage function from the 1950s, where you could rank damage due to different color temperatures. As a generalization, I think that we have to just forget that one, because we have to allow designers to choose 5000K if it really makes sense for viewing the artwork. I don't think there's ever going to be a case for going to 6,000 and 7,000 to illuminate artworks. And as long as you stay in the 3,000 to 5,000 band Kelvin, the differences in damage to certain colors, I think, are they're marginal relative to the improvement in the perception.
Yep.
So the 7,000K LED lamps I showed was to show a really extreme case of horrible spike.
Adrian, you had questions as well.
Yes. Let me check. Yeah, there was one thing that I found very interesting in, and your talk, Agnes, made me think of it the most. Your talk and also the talk of Georges. I was thinking that, for example, in his talk, Georges showed us a lot of pictures. And these pictures are usually photographs that have been taken under a certain type of illumination. And so we don't even know if these photographs have been, if these documents have been created, how they answer or not to this question that we are asking, what's the proper light for illuminating this painting? And so this was one thing, and the other thing was what told Agnes about the fading of the paintings. So there are different transformations of the color of the artworks that are captured inside of these documents, and they are not documented. So we don't really know what we see unless these are photos that have been made in the classical photo studio with the little color checker, and then we know that it's supposedly a tungsten incandescent light bulb or something similar with a color corrected document with softwares. But I was wondering why it would be, or I think it would be really interesting both for art historians, for people who like art history, like me, to have more documented documents, if I can say it like that. So when we have a document about an artwork, we actually know what we are looking at. And also, when a work has been done, when a study has been done on how supposedly, for example, the Van Gogh room has faded and how it may have been before, then wouldn't it be interesting in art history books to have these documents instead of or next to the actual stage of like aging of the colors of this painting? Because if we want to understand the painter, probably we need to see the purple walls and not the light blue ones.
Yeah, that's right. And that's definitely a challenge for any art historical research and trying to compare or follow change through time if it wasn't documented in the same way that we can document now. And it will be the same in the future, whatever we do for condition reporting now. We think we take the perfect pictures, but in 30 years from now, that will also be old-fashioned and we'll miss a lot of information that we don't know yet. So
yeah, I quite agree. When preparing my paper, I was looking on Google Images for images of the paintings. If you do this kind of experience, it's just terrible because for the same painting you have a really huge wide of different color. So when it is possible, I try to get the picture from the museum because supposedly in the museum the photograph tries to get a better image, but a perfect one, I don't think there is any. What we should do, but it's almost never the case, is before the pic or in front of the picture, put a color scale. So it helps a lot to see what kind of transformation have been done. And it is well known also that nowadays there is a tendency to intensify saturation in most colors. So this is obvious, but we have to try to take it into account. But it's not so easy. And every time that I'm talking about the pictures through internet or in a presentation with a PowerPoint, and I still have to say warnings at the beginning of my paper saying, I'm so sorry, I'm talking about some colors, but they are not the colors you are going to see on the screen because of this difference. So yeah, this is terrible, and we don't know what to do with it. There is an important shift because in books of art history before, I would say 1940, most of the time the works of art were reproduced in black and white. So this is a huge progress that now we have colors, but what colors? This is, well, a very big problem, so we have to be aware of it. But I don't see any solution at the moment for this very complex issue.
it's true with photography nowadays for cataloging in the museum. condition reporting. They use the color strips, and you hope to have the right image. Also, the standards for digitization, they describe trueness of colors, or at least documenting them. And then you show them on your screen. Your screen is not my screen. I already see different colors. And then you print them out. I haven't seen any printer printing out the same. So all sorts of issues. And we had that with the bedroom of Van Gogh, that for once went to an exhibition in Japan. So we thought, here's our chance, it's coming off the wall. Let's take a picture now. And we take a picture when it comes back. And then we see what one exhibition in Japan does. Of course, it doesn't work because you can't compare the pictures. Okay, how can we do this? We have the world's most famous chip builder factory and the hot shots in the Netherlands that know all about optics. And just take a picture of it. There's no can't do. So we haven't solved that issue yet. Also, we have a lovely exhibition of Bob Ross, the television painter. You may have seen his wonderful how to paint a painting in with happy little trees in 27 minutes. And if you see the paintings, they look pretty horrible compared to what we have always seen on television. They were rich in color, and if you see them in real, they're pretty flat. So it's also fascinating what a good effect television and screens can have.
Well, can I say something about this? Because it's very interesting, because maybe Bob Ross, I don't know, but why not? You know, maybe Bob Ross chose his colors to look good on TV, actually. So that would be another, you know, I guess on TV certain colors, but they don't look at the color itself, they look at the color on the screen. So I can perfectly imagine that the colors were chosen like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And he had to stick to the same hairdo as well. He hated it, but that was his selling for TV. Marcus, when you guys teach to your arts students, do you give them any concepts about the preservation of their works in the future as well?
What we tell is they should write what they used, which type of technology, for example, a beamer or a light source. So at least, because you forget it or after some years, so at least they have this information. Yeah. But normally the problem is also these works are quite temporary. And it's a pity. They have not so many chances to make to show them again, so they are just made once, mostly of them. But we try to tell them that they write what they used. At least they have this information for later.
If I can add something about this. It's when you think about documentation from an artist point of view, I mean, it's not necessary for him to know exactly what, I mean, what is the essence of his artwork. I mean, it's very difficult, and I'm not sure if it worth it actually, because when we talk about an issue with light and painting, but I think it's a bit of a shame to over normalize the light on paintings, because, well, if I think about sculpture, which is a better example, when the light changes during the day, you have the shadows moving on the sculpture, and you give a more different impression of the sculpture and the movement it has. And for painting, it's a bit of the same idea, actually. Well, for traditional painting, when you have, I don't know how to say it, the brushes, traces, and so you have movement in the painting also, especially if in the Impressionist. So is there a good light? It's the same when you say there is daylight to show this painting. What is daylight? Is it daylight in the morning, in the sunset? Daylight is a broad concept, and I quite like the idea of events in the museum. Just like Stefan said, you have to see and save, but saving it's a point, of course, but it shouldn't be above the artwork. It should be with the flow of the artwork. And why not propose with dynamic lights in the morning some event when you see the light of the morning in the museum, to see the painting at different hours of the day, and maybe repeat the cycle every hour, who knows. But I mean, you have a lot of possibilities, and by this, what I want to say is, I mean, over normalization is not a good thing, even for documentation. You can fix something in time and think it will not evolve. It's not an issue. It's impossible.
But that actually touches on the topic of museums putting on show after show, and there's lots of changes because we have to be attractive for the audience and they need to come and see new things. Whereas with light, you could leave the same things hanging on the wall and just change the light, and it's a completely different experience. So you draw in that same audience over and over again with your same objects, saving a lot of effort on rotation and rehangings. Could be a good solution. Let's see. Robert also, yeah, you, Adrian.
Oh yeah, sorry. Yeah, I just wanted to react to what Olivier said, because I of course agree very much. I think that okay, it may be a good idea to advise painters to use high quality LED lamps in their studio. Why not? But also, I think that many artists and I'm representing this kind of people here, I guess. They are really not interested by standard products. They are always trying to find, for example, if I have the choice between, like, let's say a common magenta pigment, or if I can find a very rare one which is slightly different but which works much better for me, I will definitely use the weird one. And I do that with like hundreds of pigments. I collect LEDs from all over the world because I'm searching for very specific wavelengths that are like a few nanometers more on the blue side, and that works much better, etc. So if I had to follow standards, I couldn't do any of these works. And so, of course, it's very important to keep that in mind, that, okay, on one side, some people may work okay with daylight or like high quality light defined in the usual way, but there's also a lot of bizarre work, I would say, and these works may be forgotten if we only focus on the standard.
I just like to, for those people in the audience who aren't very familiar with colorimetry and so on, I want to remind them that although there are different versions of daylight from 6500 to standards and sunlight and whatever, they're always a flat, full spectrum. Unless you're saying I'm standing under a tree with yellow or green leaves, that's a different situation. But as far as daylight, it varies in color temperature, but it doesn't suddenly miss all of the blue or have a big chunk of the red missing. It's always there. So there is it's not a completely, it's not lacking a little uncertainty, but there's much less uncertainty on all different kinds of daylight than there is between daylight and a crappy LED lamp that you buy in the hardware store at the moment, or a compact fluorescent lamp that we all learned to hate because it's got 82 color rendering index. So we've got to keep remembering that daylight, although it's variable, It's not variable in the way that bad light sources are variable, and it's not variable in the way that Adrian plays his wizardry to make things surprise you. There aren't surprises outdoors when your brain has done its color corrections and adaptations. So as long as we say there is a pretty good benchmark of a full spectrum light source, which is going to be always there as some kind of benchmark, and that LED lights are still fighting to try and meet that benchmark.
Yeah.
I have a little detail, if there's nothing else, is that in terms of the TM30 and the new color rendering index from CIE, the good news is, because I looked at all of this before we published our publication, we had to stick with what was official and current, which is CIE, the old one. But the good news is our recommendation of a CRI of at least 90, when you look at many different kinds of light bulbs, and we saw one of those graphs of different light sources, in the range of 70 to 80, yeah, there are huge differences between the new standard and the old standard. If you stick to above 90, 90 to 100, there are only 3 or 4 points difference between the new standard and the old CIE RA. So I'm going to be very comfortable just saying to people in the next edition of the CCI recommendations, the 90 stays the same. It's just think of it in terms of CIE 224 or TM30 if you're an American, because they're not significantly different in terms of quality. But when you go below 90 down to 80 and 70, yeah, the cloud of dots start to blow up. But in the top right corner of that curve of comparing the two standards, they converge. So the nice thing about saying 90 and above is that it's also going to be resistant to obsolescence as the standards change.
Maybe yes, I would like to add something about what said Olivier, the daylight for painter. Yes, it is true that what the impressionist so someone put Les Cathédrales de Monet in the chat. Yes, indeed. With Monet, what happens, I think, is a first shift from working in a studio and working in daylight. For many artists, the important was to have the same, more or less the same light than the orientation to north in many studios, because for many artists, the fact of this light change was a kind of perturbation. So they wanted to get the same light. And so what Monet and others showed is the fact that indeed light changes, daylight changes all the time. And so that's what Monet wanted to put in evidence in his series of Cathedral. And so it is a first step, realizing that light changes, and what we as artists, what we have to do is to put emphasis in what we perceive, the perception not of an ideal standard light, but the changes of light. And so I think that what Seurat added, therefore, is the perception we have of light when we have not daylight, but artificial light. And so this is a really important shift in art history, because the standard is not daylight anymore. A lot of artists, I've tried to say it quickly yesterday, a lot of artists working during the night change their color the following day in the morning, because the color they painted with electric light or gas light didn't match what they saw on the painting in the morning with daylight. So they changed it in order to eliminate this transformation and this deformation. Now, what happens from Seurat onward is the fact that what is important is my own perception of what is light, even artificial light. And so I think this is quite important.
Well, I was, sorry, when I said it, it was more about having different standard, not one one standard for museum illumination, but maybe several, just like you have in several artwork, you have different cases, different. It's always a question of context and situation, and also concept. For modern art, it's a bit different. Just as you said, you need a fixed light, or you won't see the different colors change. But for more contemporary art, you have more and more play with the light. So it's a bit difficult to normalize too much and prefix something, saying this is the. I don't know if I say it well.
Well, I think from this whole discussion, we come to Adrian as an artist, and so did Van Gogh. You use the materials that you like, that you love, that you can express your emotion with, because that's part of what it's all about. Then you come to documenting when it comes into a museum. It's completely different from having something at home. When an object comes into a museum, it changes its feature completely. It becomes sort of a relic. For documenting, you need standards, because otherwise you can never compare. But then for display, it becomes an emotional thing again. And then Chris comes with his personal and the testing with the people of how could this look and convey the message, the story that you want to tell as a museum. That may be different from what the artist had in mind when he created it.
Yeah, the thing is that with light we can go very far. It's a very powerful medium. We can, if we want, we can change a lot. And so if artists and we work together, okay, we can we work together with them, and they may ask what they want. But if it is about collections, we will try to stay as much as possible of what you see and just showing it. And we know we can make it better. Sometimes, and they ask it sometimes, we're not very happy with this painting and the whole exhibition. Can you make it a little bit better? It's a difficult discussion. But it's possible.
And may I add? Agnes, you asked about artwork exhibition and documentation. What is very important is for certain works which are not in a complete dark room, the ambient light is also very important. So, and that you have to decide on where you do the artwork. You know, you have to see how is the light, or how can you do the ambience of the light, because some works don't need complete darkness, or are not so. They need some ambient light to have, I think, to have to experience the whole space and not only the artwork. So this is like a second difficulty maybe for documentation.
Well, absolutely, and we have to think of all these things so that we can document as much as we need for the future. But in that respect, the museum business is pretty insecure. Adrian, you were going to say something.
Yeah. Well, I think that the one part that we discuss here is about ethics. Like, what's the limit when it starts to become a form of cheating. For example, on in marketing, if you would transform completely the color of some groceries in the supermarket, or if you, or in the Sistine Chapel, if you start to enhance the brightness of the colors because of some spectral tuning that is being made. So I would be interested if anyone has contribution about these ideas and these questions.
In this era of fake news, we're now onto the fake colors.
I have seen it, sunset, and it's just like putting one spot more on the sun to make it a little bit more stronger. Yeah, it's you cannot do this on an old painting. This is cheating the people, and it's also something. People start to see it after a while. That's a bit. It's something what I'm feeling also like about this dynamic lighting. I'm a bit afraid. There was a time that they put like in every museum, they still do it. There had to be a lot of screens with explanations and touch screens where you can do interactive things. And but it's coming to a limit. So now I feel like the public, they don't want to be in this. Yes, it's kind of a Disneyland experience sometimes because there's so much screens. So they want to see the real thing. And I think with dynamic light and all this tricky things, I think people get gonna be very quickly bored of it. They want to see real things.
Well, if nobody has something to say, then maybe I can communicate, because I originally wanted to ask this to Kevin Smith, because I know he's been, well, I expected that he would know how to answer that question. So the story was that once I was in a supermarket in Brussels a few years ago, and there was a fridge with very cold white light, maybe 8000 K or 7-8, very, very white, almost bluish. And inside of this fridge, there were these little blue boxes that contained salmon flesh, like this typical salmon from Norway. And the salmon was extremely orange, very bright. So out of curiosity, I took it out of the fridge, and outside of the fridge, it looked really pale and not so attractive anymore. And so I asked Kevin if there was any kind of regulation about this, and also how would he, what does he think of this in terms of an ethical question? And so Kevin said that I don't know about legal regulation for retail, but there are guidelines in place for many lighting situations. And what you describe is quite common and is also applied a lot in butcher shops, where the meat tends to be illuminated. Where the meat tends to be illuminated by lighting that enhances the red. Whether these lamps meet the requirement for general lighting or, for example, office lighting, I don't really know, as my expertise is mainly on the scientific side. Now, you must also consider that what many consider the ultimate truthful lighting, i.e. daylight, can also make certain meat and several other products look quite dull and grayish compared to more warm white lighting like halogen. And in addition, when you took the fish out of the refrigerator, you looked at it under the shop's ambient illumination, which could have been lower quality lighting or just colder light. And what was interesting was this last sentence, I think, even more interesting. Some shops explicitly use this type of lighting as a sort of brand lighting to indicate that they are less expensive. So
this is Aldi, and it's the best light plan that exists is the one of Aldi supermarkets, because you enter and you feel it's cheap. You enter the Deleuze and you feel, here it's more expensive. They cannot be the cheapest. It works so much on the brain. It's it's wonderful. They have this this setting up in Philips in Eindhoven, where they have the same shop, and the only thing is changing is the lamps. And it's amazing what you see. It's unbelievable. Yeah. You can cheat the people a lot.
But then, Adrian, what did you do with the salmon? Did you buy it or did you give it back?
No, I put it back.
So your response already tells the shop whether this works or not. And that may happen in
I guess
museums as
usually
well.
you take it and you put it directly in the bag, and you don't look at it inside of the shop. But I didn't go outside to see how it looked outside. So I didn't taste it, because there are also interactions between the taste and the color. I guess this is very complicated, basically, this question.
But then if you come home disappointed, you may never go to that shop again. So
yeah, that's for sure. Yeah.
The test is in the tasting. Yeah. Let's see, how are we for time? We're already slightly over the program, but so far it's been an interesting discussion. Are there any issues that need to be tackled before people leave Brussels? Otherwise, I'm going to ask the speakers if they have a last remark after these 2 days. Wilfried, what do you take away from these 2 days?
Yeah, I was not here yesterday, unfortunately. It was not possible, yeah. But today, most time, I followed your lectures, etc. So it was very interesting to have a look in this world, yeah, of arts, etc. So for me, it's a different world. Usually, I'm in another world, and so of course we have to put together both worlds, and it was very interesting from my side, yeah. You said, maybe Adrian, a short remark. These lamps in the shops, of course, they are not for general lighting. They are really made for special lighting of meat, etc. So you couldn't use this for general lighting, and there is no standard which, gives limits or so. But it's free. Of course, if you, it's a tricky thing. If you go too far with these things, then you have more damage than advantage. You understand what I mean? So maybe it's regulating by itself, yeah. So it's a decision, yeah. But in every shop, meat and also other things, there are special lamp types, and they are used all over the world, but not for general lighting. They wouldn't be possible to be used in general lighting. Yeah, okay. So I'm sorry that I couldn't contribute more, but yeah, okay. It was an interesting day for me. Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you for your contribution as well. Marcus, any last words for the audience?
Yeah, I think we as artists maybe don't think too much of these questions, how to conserve the artwork, because it's mostly temporary, as I said. And I see some parallels in the lighting of museums to find a good balance between not so much staging and some staging, some contrast. Maybe contrast is always, I think, important to have some contrast in lighting, or even in a museum, maybe too. But it depends a lot of the artwork, of course. But I find it interesting, like with the small fibers. It's like a small stage of art. It looks like that, so that's very nice to see how it works. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Thank you for this nice meeting. It was very interesting, and unfortunately, we could not be there in Bristol. Really, that's a pity.
Still, we're all here. Chris, what's your final words?
It's always interesting because well, what I find very especially the first Anne Goyer who was speaking. It was a very good start because she just like discovered this small thing that other people would believe it as it is. And then just going on it, and all these people that make this study on it and just pure it out. It's always interesting then the different people from different disciplines, and they go always far in their thing. Yeah, it's very very interesting to follow this whole day. Yeah, yeah. Also, you Olivier, what you do, your work. It's yeah. I think we're gonna. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Stefan, any last advice for the museum or the artist?
Well, actually, I'm not going to give advice. I'm going to react to the whole 2 days and something I noted, which was lovely to see, which is the convergence in the subject of color between artists and scientists. And we saw that certainly with the two Anns and the discovery of the blue, and also the art historians pointing out that this was a discovery of a rediscovery of a better understanding of what Leonardo and others were already doing to get these Raleigh scattering blues. But I also wanted to help people understand there's a convergence between the two very technical speakers, one the artist, Adrian, and today's speaker from the world of colorimetry and standards. And is it possible to share my video or my screen? I don't know.
Yeah, I will let you share. Yeah.
I'll see if I can pick the right window.
Okay. So now you should be able to share.
Okay, share and screen one. Are you seeing a spectrum?
It's coming up.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you see my arrow and cursor?
Yeah.
All right. Do you remember, everyone, that Adrian was talking about how boring this end of the red was and this end of the blue, but there was these really important sections where he talked about things changing rapidly and interesting, and it was this blue-green transition and the green-yellow transition. And then when we looked at that long talk about color rendering index and all of those calculations and 3 weeks of processing, what it pointed out was those same areas are where you get a lot of the variation, and those are incredibly important bands for getting an accurate color rendering. And when both people were saying, we've got to be really careful what the light source is doing in here. Now, these curves are the cones in your eye, and the reason those locations are important is they're the transitions between your blue cone and your green cone is this band right here. And this transition where these two curves start to contribute equally, of course, you can get a very rapid shift in your eye because suddenly two cones are changing from being dominant and going over to the other. So it was nice to see when I listened to the color rendering thing and to be reminded that those are the same two locations on the spectrum that Adrian was coming at from a much more poetic and sensorial kind of way. So I just wanted to remind people familiar with what are called the XYZ or the red, green, blue cones. These are the sensitivities of the three receptors in our eyes that give us color. And it all kind of hangs together. And it was nice to see an artist and a scientist in colorimetry really converging on the same kinds of discovery of where the important regions are. That's my comment.
Mm.
Great. So a bonus lecture.
So I don't know how to unshare my screen now. Switch me off, Adrian.
Adrian throws you out. And then I will ask Anne, your blue eyes are right in that blue cone. What do you take away from this?
Tu traduiras, Adrien, s'il te plaît?
Okay.
Alors, déjà, je suis toujours très émue de voir à quel point la couleur est vraiment un terrain d'interdisciplinarité et de fécondation, d'interfécondation. Et c'est vrai pour ce qu'on a vécu avec Adrien à l'école de Troyes, et c'est une belle réussite que tu viens de mettre au point là, avec cette conférence. Je trouve beaucoup de choses passionnantes et qui sont justement qui s'interpénètrent en fait. Et voilà, et c'est toujours aussi un plaisir de rencontrer et de partager nos sensations sur la couleur, nos compréhensions. Et puis, ce que j'aime par-dessus tout, c'est que ça continue de soulever des questions. Et je trouve que c'est ça qui est magnifique et qui est toujours un terrain merveilleux pour moi. En tout cas, voilà, je vous remercie tous pour ces 2 journées qui ont été très instructives pour moi.
Okay, so Anne said that if I understood well, because your sound is a bit like strange, but Anne was referring to this school where we met in France, which is called Okra, which I said at the beginning yesterday was my model for creating these two study days, which is also interdisciplinary, and it's also it's a place where different people from different horizons meet and share and exchange. And she thinks it works very well here as well. And she says that it was a pleasure to meet you all. And that was like great grounds for her, great food for her thinking and for her. Well, it gave her a lot of nice energy and motivation, probably.
Et je ferai un effort pour l'anglais la prochaine fois. Je
And
m'excuse.
next time she's gonna study English a little bit more. She's
It's not a problem. It's just us that don't speak French. Georges, you speak both languages. Thank God. What are your last words for here?
Are you hearing me? Okay. The last word. Something quite interesting during these 2 days is the complex relationship between art and science. This is obvious that there is a kind of collaboration between artists and scientists. So I was wondering how to understand this, and it seems to me that we should have to make a distinction between different levels. So one level is what we can call worldviews. So sometimes artists and scientists share the same worldview. It is, for example, the case in the case of Seurat. Art historian Meyer Shapiro showed that Seurat shared the same worldview with Ernst Mach, the author of a book on sensation analysis. And so, yes, this is a kind of same frame. Yesterday, someone put in the chat during my paper that another art historian, Daniel Arras, showed that between Vermeer and Kepler, there is the same kind of relationship. And also, a French philosopher, Michel Serres, showed, for example, that the painter Turner showed the same, he talked about translation, but in fact it is that he shared with Carnot the same kind of worldview. So this is one level in which we can understand the complex relationship between art and science. Another level, in the case of color, is what I would like to call misunderstandings. There are a lot of misunderstandings between artists and scientists. I was led to this conclusion when working on a French chemist, Chevreul, and his complex relationship to artists. And so I realized that it is not the same, even if they can share some worldview, when you see the details, you have, and it's important for me to distinguish between theories of color and artistic, because the purpose of artists and the purpose of scientists is different. So that the collaboration is a complex one, but it's possible. And so this is the the third level, which is complementarity. So it seems to me that more and more there are complementarity between artists and scientists. So the case of the two Anne in the first paper yesterday is a good example. The work of Adrien is another very interesting example. And of course, because of his own work, Adrien was interested in suggesting to come to this conference to some scientists. And the final example I would like to give is my own experience. I've been working a lot on pigment, on a natural pigment, cochineal, and I was quite unable to work it alone as an art historian for a very obvious reason, is that cochineal is very a special pigment. When you look at it in a painting, it is very difficult to see if it is cochineal or if it is kermesse or another pigment. So it was absolutely necessary for me to ask scientists working in the scientific department of art museums to help me in order to recognize in artwork through very specific analysis what kind of pigment the artist used. So it is another kind of this complementarity more and more necessary in today when we are working on color or where we are working on light. And so I'm very happy for this conference because it gives us a fantastic frame in order to discuss all these complex issues shared by artists and scientists. So thank you very much.
Beautiful. That brings us to Olivier, who works on the crossing of art and science and history.
Yes, exactly. Actually, but yeah, first, thank you for these two very informative days. And yeah, I would like to finish with, we have two extremes here. You have Adrien, which is an extreme documentarist. His process, creative process, it's very interesting, but you won't see this often. It's I think it's the first time I see something, I guess. And the other side, you have Marcus, which is more like everyone. You don't have to focus especially on the documentation. For the case of Adrian, it's part of his process, but it doesn't have to be. It's our job. Of course, you will make my job easier if you document it first, but it's my job to find it. What is your art, and what does society see in your work as art? And voilà. So don't worry about it. Thank you.
Voila. All right, before I hand back to Adrian, I will share with you that I thoroughly enjoyed these 2 days where indeed I have been introduced to light artists and their way of working and thinking with a completely new medium. I'm used to looking at light from the museum perspective of making artworks live, whereas they make light live. So thank you very much for that. Adrian, could I share the results of the Horse Tuscany experiment quickly? If you let me share my screen. Yeah. Then I'll take you here. So hang on, I'll do this like this. These are the scores where you saw in the first stages of fading, the first 4 megalux hours, a considerable, maybe small change. And as we go further along the series, the change obviously is seen as larger. In terms of losing value or the remaining value, in the first steps, it's a fair loss, but it definitely becomes bigger towards the end. And I didn't ask you for arguments, but from previous experiments, I know that there's things of losing detail, losing the artist intent, but also the loss of, I only have a little bit of color left, and if I lose any more, it's all gone. So it's that clinging on to the last bit of color that also plays there. For Tuscany, which is a much more complex work of art, and I would have been very interested in Kevin's work on perception of how the complexity of this work actually influences what we see. Okay, the first step is seen as a small change, even none in some instances, even though it's as big as with Horse, but this is seen much less, and therefore also valued as not a lot of value lost. There's even an increase in value. And if we go further down the line, there's still only a small change visible between these 2 stages, although you can see that compared to the original, there's actually quite a change, but you weren't aware of that. And that same change in quantity is experienced as a slightly broader range, but actually is not that much of a difference overall in the value in what you think of it. So with Horse, you think more of that second change than with Tuscany, which has to do with the much more color richness of the image, I think. But I have to interpret all of this. This is only one experiment out of a whole series where I try to figure out what I'm actually doing. But one day before I retire, I hope that will become clear. So this is where I stop, and I hand back to you, Adrian.
So thank you, really, everybody. I think it's the first time I organize a conference like this, and I'm really happy because I mean, I think it was very interesting, not only for me, but for everyone who was involved. And well, I guess that the best thing I can say is that maybe there will be a next Light on Painting, and this time we can meet. And that's going to be really nice to go to the restaurant together finally. So really, thank you, everybody. Everything has been recorded, so I still have a bit of work to put everything online. For the people who couldn't connect early, including Georges, it will be possible to watch everything in replay. And that's it. I'm pretty tired, I should say. So, but really, it was great. Thank you very much. And talk soon. Yeah.
Thank you very much, and the organizers for having us, and all the audience for sticking around.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. So, look.
So, yeah.